Okay, this is worth talking about for a sec. I actually powered the amp up for the first time after the change, and well, after the restoration work. The bias is running hot, like about 80%, and I figured out why they had the that extra resistor sitting across here on the bias caps. You can see I've recapped the bias caps. Now, this resistor here, which sits on the board here, is a 220k resistor. It's the drop-in resistor for the bias supply, which is tapped off in a 50 watt amp, one of the high voltage secondaries. It's the white wire here, which is tapped onto the standby switch. Okay, standby switch is switching the two high voltage secondaries from the power transformer, which are the two red wires at the bottom of that switch, and they connect to the two blue, which come in here, and then into the rectifier diodes, right? But also on one side you tap off for the bias in a 50 watt amp, and that 220 ohm resistor drops that AC voltage down to then prepare it to be rectified by a single diode and create the bias supply, which is in DC. But too much voltage was being washed off. So if the bias is running hot, it means the negative bias voltage that you want on pin 5 of your power tubes, it's too low. And I measured it as about minus 21 volts. Kind of rule of thumb is minus 40. Right? And even with this adjusted, the bias pot adjusted to its maximum range, you know, 21, minus 21 was the most you could get. Now, let's measure this 220k resistor. It's 336k, right? So this has drifted massively. Let's call it 350. Okay, so this thing washing off way too much voltage, and what the previous guy had been in here to rectify that problem, he'd just thrown that resistor across here, when in actual fact this is the culprit here. So I'm going to put a 220k resistor in here. We'll see where we are. Okay, so I've now put the new 220k resistor in here, in that bias, the bias drop-in resistor there, and I've powered the amp up. I've got the bias adjustment pot just set right in the middle, and you can see from here I've got, I mean, that's still too cold, but it's not nowhere near as hot as it was, right? So, you know, I had like 50 to 60 milliamps before, so I'll adjust this. I want to get this kind of, you know, mid to high 30s, touching 40 maybe, given the plate voltage. And but these are a nice set of matched EL34s, the Mullards. So this will be a lot happier here. Just a word on grounding. These guys here, this was literally tacked on. Like I heard a tack soldering. This was another whole level. They were just kind of sitting on there. Kind of looked at it and went, that doesn't look very secure. I gave it a little tug, and they just popped straight off. So this is the ground. This fatter brown wire is a center tap ground for the heaters, filament supply, and the thinner black one is the center tap for the high voltage secondary on the power transformer, both of which need to be grounded, and grounded well. So I'm going to fix that up. The joys. Well, I can report with that grounding improved, the amp is a lot quieter. Just at idle, I mean the volumes here are down, but it had quite a reasonable hum at idle, which was making me contemplate redoing the grounding in this, which is like, you know, it's okay to do that, but I prefer not to do it in a vintage amp, just because, you know, it's vintage. Fixing those grounds and getting that connection much better has improved it out of sight. So grounding is everything. So I've spent the day on this, guys, and I've got to say, this amp is sounding fucking great. So I cannot stop playing AC/DC riffs on this thing. I'm going to take you through kind of the the restoration things here, right? But just a couple of notes on the noise floor. You would have seen me already mention this grounding, which changed it dramatically. Now the amp still, when I kind of like, it was quiet at idle, but when I put the volume up, had a terrible kind of, again, it sounded like, I don't know, like it's probably about 150 hertz, somewhere around there. Kind of not too high, but it wasn't like 50 hertz main sum. And first thing I did, I thought, right, I'm going to pull out V1, because when the volume was down, that noise wasn't there when I bring the volume up. So the only thing that the noise was obviously in the circuit before the volume, and the only thing before the volume in these plexis is V1. So one of these was lurking in there. It's a Sovtech 12AX7 LPS long plate special. Some people like these in the phase inverter position. I'm not a big fan of them though in the preamp, and there's a lot of opinion on the internet about whether these will last in the cathode follower position as well. Now this amp had them in V1, V2 and V3, so I'm just consulting with Luke at the moment about what he wants to do, other than this is definitely going in the bin. I've got one of my standard JJ, just normal production JJ tubes in here. Noise floor's completely gone. The amp's really quiet at idle now, and when you crank it, and you can kind of hear a little bit of gain hiss there now, but totally normal. So that's a win. Happy with that. This restoration work, pulled the board. I should have talked about how I was going to do that, right? And just carefully removed all of these coupling caps and replaced them one by one with the mustards that Luke supplied. And you just got to love the look of mustard caps on a Marshall like this. Just awesome, right? Just kind of little things to note, I guess. And this was a voicing preference. I did end up putting a 0.68 bypass cap across the cathode for V2A. A lot of these amps didn't have them at this era. I played the amp without it. I used some clips to, this kind of thing, right? To just whack it in there and play the amp with it in. And I was like, yeah, that's what we want. It's kind of missing a little bit of zing, and that's really brought it in here. Bright cap's in here now as supplied. I'm going to tidy up this a little bit here. There was a 0.1 presence cap, 0.1 microfarad presence cap in there, but because Luke had supplied all these new old stock mustards, I replaced it with a 0.1 mustard, and I'm sure we'll all feel good knowing that that's been used. Sounding fantastic. I'm pretty much done, right? The only thing I think I'm going to do is, you notice this amp, someone might have already seen it and it's gone, what are you doing about that? There's no grid stopper resistors on the power tubes here. Okay, pin 5. So this green wire here, that's that green wire. Okay, so this is coming off the phase inverter. These are the coupling caps on the output of the phase inverter, the bias splitter resistors, and this green wire goes to pin 5 and this orange wire goes to pin 5. And this is how we're driving, the phase inverter is driving the power tubes. Now, you'd really want to have a grid stopper on the power tubes, and certainly in all contemporary amps you will see that. It helps to stop any kind of runaway oscillation and noise on the grids of the power tubes. So as a final thing, I'll put grid stoppers in here, probably 5K6, which would be kind of correct for this style of amp. Screw the main board in and put it in the head shell, and then we're going to crank it and you can have a listen to it.